Hi everyone, this is topic 1, language and communication, language functions, communicative competence and its components. So, introduction. The first and foremost issue when teaching a language is the subject matter itself. What is communication? What is language? What does it mean when someone knows how to use a language? What must the learner learn and the teacher teach? Language teachers indeed need a core theoretical framework to guide their teaching from the principles established in the general curriculum up to its most practical application in the classroom. First of all, an understanding of what is being taught must be acquired, which is simply put how to communicate with other people by using a specific language, and in what ways that language can perform specific functions in any kind of given situation. This way, it could be stated that the final objective of any language teaching is that the student achieves a certain degree of what is called communicative competence with all of its components. Indeed, the acquisition of communicative competence is the acknowledged aim of all language instruction, and as such it is contemplated in the Common European Framework for Reference of Languages, the subsequent companion volume, and the official curriculum for the official language schools. Students are expected to have a functional knowledge of English in this case, and appropriate communicative skills to use it in both written and oral situations. In other words, when it comes to learn a language, not only it is important to learn how to compose and comprehend utterances as isolated linguistic units, but also to learn how to use them appropriately to achieve a communicative purpose. Consequently, in this present topic, there will be an attempt to build a sound theoretical basis regarding the communicative and instrumental functions of language, as well as to present its implications in the teaching practice. Language and communication. Language is the most important means of human communication, in which a system is used for encoding information. In its simplest definition, language is a system of agreed upon symbols and the rules to manipulate them functionally in context. A consolidation of a number of possible definitions of language may result in the following composite definition. Number 1, language is systematic. Number 2, language is a set of arbitrary symbols. Number 3, those symbols are primarily vocal, but they may also be visual. Number 4, the symbols have conventionalized meanings to which they refer. Number 5, language is used for communication. Number 6, language operates in a speech community or culture. Number 7, language is essentially human, although possibly not limited to humans. And number 8, language is acquired by all people in much the same way. Since language is essentially a means of communication, it follows logically that how to be a good communicator is what should be learned and taught in the first place. Communication may be defined as the process of transferring information from a sender to a receiver with the use of a medium in which the communicated information is understood. Communication could also be generally described as a continuous process of expression, interpretation, and negotiation, which depends on the cooperation of all the participants. In the treatment of the process of communication, the following different phases may be listed. First of all, selection of the content to transmit. After that, encoding of the message. Right after, transmission of the message through a given channel. Decoding of the message, and last but not least, apprehension of the transmitted content. One of the most productive schematic models for a communication system emerged from the Russian linguist Roman Jacobson. He stated that in any act of verbal communication, the following 6 constituents can be found: the sender, the receiver, the code, the message, the context, and the channel. Now, a note on the relationship between language and communication. So, in the previous section, it was stated that language is used for communication, but strangely enough, it may come as a surprise that some of the most prominent linguists disagreed with this idea. For example, Chomsky maintained that human language is a system for free expression of thought, essentially independent of stimulus control, need satisfaction, or instrumental purpose. Therefore, he rejected the idea that communication was necessary for the function of language. Nevertheless, not everyone agreed with Chomsky's ideas, and that's why within contemporary linguistics there's an opposition between functionalists on the one hand and formalists on the other, which are the ones who agreed with what Chomsky stated. Language functions. Communication is a series of communicative acts or speech acts which are used systematically to accomplish particular purposes. In reality, a whole list of language functions or purposes can be given, and in fact it has been given by many authors, but here we're just going to focus on the one that Jacobson gave in the 60s. So we can find cognitive function, referential function, phatic function, emotive function, poetic function, and metalinguistic function. Then there have been a few additions, but to put it more simply, it can broadly be distinguished that it's either transactional, that is practical and factual, and interactional, personal, emotional, and social uses of the language. Most of the functions can be included within one group or another. A note on systemic functional linguistics. So once the functions have been considered, it's time to move on to the semantic and functional orientation of systemic functional linguistics, from now on SFL, which accounts for how language is structured for use. So the grammar in this type of linguistics is systemic because the notion of system is of paramount importance. Language is defined as a semantic system with other systems through which those meanings are encoded, that is, a system network. The organizing concept of these systems is the notion of choice. So, if I give you an example, could you tell me the time, please? That's a yes/no question. What's the time? That's a WH question. I would like to know the time. That's a declaration. And tell me the time, please. That's imperative. The choices that the speaker or writer makes are assumed to be meaningful and relate speaker's intentions to the concrete forms of a language. This way, the same message can be encoded in different ways with an impact on the meaning. So this grammar is also functional because it maintains that the overriding property of language is its functional nature, whereas formalist grammars only would ask, what do these forms mean? That is, they would focus on the form. Functional grammar opts for how is language structured for use? That is, they focus on the meaning. So SFL divides meanings into 3 broad areas called meta-functions, which have an impact on the way language is used. First, we have ideational. Language is used to organize, understand, and express our perceptions. Then we have interpersonal. Language is used to enable us to participate in communicative acts with other people. And finally, textual. Language is used to relate what is said or written to the rest of the text. So in almost any instance of language use, all 3 meta-functions operate simultaneously. Linguistic versus communicative competence. So the origin of the concept of communicative competence started when Saussure made the difference between langue, that is the common grammatical knowledge shared by the speakers of a given linguistic community, and parole, the way in which that knowledge is manifested in each individual speaker. Later on in the 60s, Chomsky stated a similar idea, which was the difference between competence and performance. So the term communicative competence was a reaction to these distinctions. It was coined by Himes in the 70s, and Himes thought that Chomsky's notion of competence was too limited. So communicative competence was defined as the ability not only to apply the grammatical rules of language to form correct utterances, but also to know when to use them appropriately. Seminal work on defining communicative competence was carried out by Canale and Swine, who distinguished 4 components. The first one, grammatical competence, that is, words and rules. Number 2, discourse competence, cohesion and coherence. Number 3, social linguistic competence, that is, appropriateness. And number 4, strategic competence, communication strategies. Later on, I think it was Van Eck who added socio-cultural competence, but since the publication of the Common European Framework, this was somehow replaced by intercultural competence. The intercultural competence is a combination of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and behaviors, which allow a speaker to varying degrees to recognize, understand, interpret, and accept other ways of living and thinking beyond their home culture. The communicative approach. This approach is student-centered, and the figure of the teacher is just as a facilitator. The communicative approach, based on the concept of communicative competence, essentially aims at effective L2 communication rather than simply learning the system of the language, that is, the form. So in short, its objectives include development of communicative competence, of course, fluency rather than accuracy, and creative application. There are other current approaches such as project-based learning, problem-based learning, flipped classroom, and gamification, which are also based on the communicative approach and share most of their main principles. As a conclusion, through the influence of communicative language teaching and its importance in the Common European Framework and the companion volume, which constitute the base for the curriculum currently in place in official language schools, it continues to be widely accepted that communicative competence should be the goal of language education. This stands in contrast to previous views in which grammatical competence was usually given top priority. The guidelines present in the Common European Framework promote the use of an action-oriented approach for learning, in which learners are viewed as social agents who have tasks to accomplish in a given set of circumstances, in a specific environment, and within a particular field of action. So that's why the Common European Framework looks at competence in a wider sense and uses the term competences in plural. Also, some research suggests that the acquisition of vocabulary, grammar, discourse rules, and so on is completely useless if the learner cannot use them for the functional purpose of transmitting and receiving thoughts. Nevertheless, even if our approach to language teaching is communicative, functional, and instrumental, the importance of forms cannot be overlooked. Students need to have knowledge of the linguistic exponents embodying those meanings. So that's why an effective way of looking at the language is to depart from the discourse functions that may be conveyed in interaction and explore more the linguistic structures which embody those meanings. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, whatever, and see you in the next video.